Hello, everyone. Welcome to this VII Insider event with Ilvy and myself, something different. As always, we will let people come in from the waiting room before we get started. And as this whole thing is about question and answer, remember to put any questions you have into the Q&A box. So Ilvy, thanks for agreeing to be in the hot seat today. But given that we're always asking questions, I thought it would be good to turn it around and put ourselves on the hot seat for that. And just
really like the idea.
Yeah, and just to hear what people in our audience are thinking, what they want to talk about, and so on. And certainly, if there are any suggestions or thoughts about topics and issues that we should be covering in the future, because we'll take a summer break beginning of August, and then want to reflect on what's going to come in the next year or so. Why don't we dive straight in? We've got some questions in advance. We've got 3 already. So yeah, let's dive straight in. Jaime Carrero. So first off the bat with a question about video. As video continues to gain as the coin of the land, what are the big names, inverted commas, doing about this? I know there's a difference, and as a still photographer, still think motion is not necessarily the holy grail. Do most photographers, photojournalists offer video outright? How is that affecting their workflow? It seems to be more and more prevalent. What do you think, Ilvy? What's your experience?
I would say about 10 years ago, maybe even more. No, 10 years ago, I started doing video. And at the time when I started, I really felt that clients would be asking more and more and more video. And for a few years they did. I would say 2011, 12, 13, it was becoming a thing. And I think somewhere along that line, it kind of went like this. The questions from clients coming in were stabilizing, I would say. I love still photography. I like doing video. But if I would have to choose, I would still pick still photography. So I'm quite happy that the bigger clients really, they do ask for video, but short videos, not like short documentaries or I have made a few in the last years, and I've seen colleagues around me in the field who really thought in 2010, 11, 12 that they had to switch careers, for instance. That really didn't happen in the end. Right. And I've also seen colleagues who, throughout it all, always said, I don't want to do video at all. And I think now 10 years have moved on. A lot of us who started video, do it on the side, but it never really took over. I think still photography has something that is that strong that it survived. I think there really was a time where some of us thought, oh my goodness, every website wants video. My job is gonna die out. It really didn't. No.
Yeah. And you were quite an early adopter, weren't you? I mean, you know, when it first came out, of course, everyone talked about, quote, multimedia as a thing. And you were doing multimedia work quite early on, your story, Afrikaner Blood, for example.
Yeah, it was very early on. It was actually the second year, or we won an award with that Afrikaner Blood video in the second year that World Press Photo actually had a multimedia award. Right. So it was early. That was not because my colleague Alice van Gelder and I thought, oh, let's do something new. Not at all. We were kind of forced to do video because our video was about a racist camp. And the leader of the camp was saying such racist things that we realized a picture with text is not going to cover this, because the people reading it might not even believe the things that this racist guy was saying. So we really felt the urge to do video. But at the time, we didn't know how to actually make a proper video, how to record audio. So we were trying while being in the field. So it was a big surprise. We won first award at the World Press. It was our first video ever.
Right.
But it did give us a feeling of freedom, because video is able to go a bit more in depth sometimes. So yeah, I stayed with it for until now still.
And what's interesting about that is you felt the story and the situation demanded that different medium, because it was the fact this person was speaking this way and you could not capture that in an image.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. The first image I took of this racist leader, I remember very well. He was sitting on a chair and I took the picture of him sitting there. And I realized right away, no one will be able to tell how racist he is.
Right.
You can't tell if someone is a racist. So yeah, it forced us to.
Interesting.
To work this way.
Yeah, interesting. There's also, I mean, that raises a number of ethical questions. And in advance, Elizabeth Nakahara sent us quite a number of questions relating to ethics. And I want to ask some of those. And this is actually a good time to bring in one of those. So Elizabeth's overall question was, should the industry have an ethics policy and an ombudsman? And she asked because of a number of issues. One of the issues was about photographers maybe pretending to be sympathetic to get into circumstances that were difficult, or having to find a way to get access into a situation where they wouldn't agree with the people that they were photographing, or actually actively disagree. How is that done? How is that managed ethically? What are the questions that one needs to think about? And your case with the Afrikaner blood story is exactly that. You had to spend time with white racist Afrikaners to do that story. Did you have to pretend to get access, or how did you go about achieving access? And what were kind of the ethical issues around that?
Yeah, there were many, and this is over 10 years ago. Oh my goodness, like 12 years ago. I had just started as a photojournalist a few years prior. So I had, of course, thought about ethics, but never was lectured about it, or never was taught about it in school that much. So it all had to kind of come from the heart. But when Alice and I entered, so it was a 9-day camp where young children were being taught to be racist against Black people.
Right.
And when we entered the camp, we were allowed in. The guy that let us in didn't know, the leader of the camp didn't know if we were racist or not racist. We didn't tell him anything, but on the first day we were there, and he was saying so many racist things that we were kind of getting sick to the stomach. And we had the feeling we really wanted to go against him, but we didn't want to because we were afraid he would kick us out. So we had to find, in the first days, a fine line between disagreeing, telling him when he was overstepping our boundaries as well, when he was really like going towards us and
right.
forcing us to kind of agree with him. We would be strict. At the same time, we also didn't want to go against him by telling him every day, you are a crazy racist, we hate what you're saying.
Right.
We would have been outside of that camp within a day. Right. So after getting used to each other in those 9 days, we disagreed with everything he said, but we weren't going against him, only if he would specifically ask us. And questions right. he would ask us would, for instance, be, well, I'm better hoping you don't have any Black friends, do you?
Right.
And we would tell him, we do have Black friends. And we wouldn't even say more than that. We would just stay there.
Yeah.
He was such a narcissistic person that he kept telling us, oh, but one day you will find out. One day you'll find out that Black people, blah, 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 blah. So, so then we realized it didn't really matter what we told him. If we would go against him a bit more, we weren't there to go against him. That's not our role as journalists, but we would stand up for ourselves and be open of our thoughts if he would ask us. And we figured out pretty quickly that he didn't even care what our answers was. He was only hearing himself, as you can imagine.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, she's asking those questions, and we'll get to some of the other examples that she gives, because she's asking whether the industry should have an ethics policy. what do you think about, what do I think about that? Well, what I think about that is two things. One is, first of all, I think ethics is fundamental to the good work that is done. But I take ethics to be not an individual thing in the sense that everyone makes up their own approach, but it requires, as a starting point, I told students this recently, it requires you to be a good human being. You have to treat people in a way that you expect to be treated yourself. That's the starting point.
Yeah.
So you don't exploit, you don't abuse, you don't deceive, etc. And I don't feel that you need a written code for that. I feel that that's just part of being a good human being and interacting socially. So that's a general position. I also think that, I mean, we've had some discussions on Insider about this, and we're going to do some more stuff in October, actually an ethics workshop that people can both participate in and watch online as well. So just let me share my screen to show people what I mean. We did this event back in December 2021 with Savannah Dodd from the Photography Ethics Center. And I really like her approach to ethics because it's about this sense of constantly having, ethically interrogating yourself about thinking about your relationship with others and not responding to a prescription or a code or a document or whatever, respecting autonomy, equality, and so on. And then from that come questions of consent and wider things. So if people want to dive into that presentation, that's a good starting point. And we're going to follow up with Savannah with some more things in October. So that's my starting point. And that's also because I think that, first of all, I don't think there is a single industry here. I don't think that if we think in global terms, even in national terms, that we can talk about the photojournalism industry or the documentary industry or whatever. There's not a central industry body that's like a union or a professional association that governs everybody. It's made up of people working in all sorts of different circumstances, from freelancers to contractors to staff people to creative directors to whatever. And no one has the authority to issue kind of a set of edicts that come from a centralized place that everyone has to. It would be impossible to do that. So organizations have to. I think codes work for organizations to make statements that this is what they expect. But whether they actually ask people to follow those codes then becomes another matter. So I don't think there's an industry. I don't think it's possible to have a single code, even if there was an industry. And I think a lot of it is about people negotiating their social relationships and their working relationships in appropriate ways and in ways that they want to be treated. Now, and then I think one of the points that Savannah makes is that she talks about her approach to ethics as being situational ethics, that you have some sort of fundamental principles that you bring to a situation, but then you have to judge that situation in terms of those principles. And that requires you to constantly question and interrogate yourself. And I think that that's also, for me, one of the most important things. Ethics is a process. It's not something that you write down on a piece of paper and, well, I follow that. It's like, no, you actually have to practice it all the time.
I also think it really helps when you're working in a team.
Right.
That really helps because you can really talk about, okay, how do we handle this, or how should we handle this best? What is best practice here? And it's good to also have conversations about it. And throughout the years, things might also change. And for instance, at that racist camp, we had, what's it called? These the forms, the
release forms.
Release forms. And
yes.
I remember we had them signed at the time, but that was quite new 12 years ago to have release forms.
Yeah.
I'm very happy we did, because the release form very clearly explained what we were going to do with the video.
Yeah.
So that in a way was good to have, but it was something that wasn't a practice at the time. Now it's much more common. There are many assignments where I need release forms.
Right.
It has less to do with ethics maybe, but also because what also changed throughout the years is explaining people much better what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Like, what does it mean if I photograph you in Tanzania, and what happens to an image when you put it into a big archive somewhere?
Yeah.
That's also ethics. People have to know where their images are going.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's something that I would say 15 years ago was not talked about as much as now. I think it's really good that has become a very serious discussion.
Yeah. When you take assignments from organizations, say like the New York Times or other media organizations, do they make you aware of their ethics policy? Do they demand certain things of you? How does that work as someone who's producing stories for another organization?
I think, it's not that, I wouldn't say I probably have, but most of the people I work for, I've been working for about 15 years now. So I think I might have signed something in those first 15 years. It's not something that comes up in regular discussions on general assignments I do, but it does come up when assignments are a little bit different from what we are used to or what I am used to make. Yeah. For instance, I would say 3 months ago, I did a big assignment for the New York Times, which was about mentally ill people living in Belgium with host families.
Right.
And not for a few days, but for, I would say, their whole lives, 20 years, 30 years. And we had a lot of discussions beforehand, the editor and I, about ethics, how to approach this story. We talked to the psychiatrist, we talked to people who already knew the story, to different writers. We really spoke to a lot of people because this was a story where ethics were so important, but also difficult because the people we were photographing had to also consent and know what it was for, and their families had to, and so on. So when it gets to a special story or a story that's out of the ordinary, yes, it's definitely a discussion. With the day-to-day assignments, I think the newspapers and magazines I work for kind of think, okay, we've worked with her for 10 or 15 years.
We trust her.
Probably knows, exactly. It's like a trust relationship. Yeah. They know that I have ethical standards, or that it's important to me.
Yeah, I think that Belgian story is a really good example because, Jaime's just observed in the Q&A that the NPPA, the National Press Photographers Association of America, demands an ethical code for membership. That as an individual, you sign up to their ethical code, and if other organizations join, they have to have ethical codes. That's absolutely right. Yeah. And if I remember correctly, the NPPA code, which is quite detailed, does say things like, you must portray people with dignity, for example. Absolutely essential. But this also, I think, to me, shows kind of the limit of a code, and also how a code in that sense is just a starting point, because you can have a line that says portray people with dignity, but in your Belgian story case, that doesn't tell you how to portray them.
Yeah, very true.
You have to have the conversation with the editor about what you're going to do, and you have to involve the psychiatrist, and then you have the complex question of consent.
Yep.
Are the participants able to give consent themselves? Is it their legal guardian, et cetera, et cetera? So that's the process part. And again, going back to Savannah Dodd's point, that's why it's situational. You can say the principle is represent with dignity. Mm-hmm. The practice of doing it requires you to ask all those questions and have all that thought. And the code does not provide you an answer for that.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. The cases are so specific that it's good to have guidelines. Yeah. And I'm sure every media house I work for has ethical guidelines. Yeah. And I'm sure they overlap in most cases as well. But when in the field, you still have to see what really works when you're there, what is ethical for that specific situation. You can't put all of that down on paper. It's too specific.
Yes, you would be writing an extremely long document if you tried to cover every situation.
Exactly.
But Elizabeth asks about another situation, and she also refers to the MPPA code in this, and the MPPA code does not allow payment for interviews or stories. But sometimes photographers do pay for things for participants in their stories.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this? How do you approach this if you're documenting someone for a long period of time? Do you pay them in advance? Do you pay them during? Do you never pay them? How do you think about this issue?
Yeah, money-wise, as in cash money, I've never paid anyone, and I would never pay anyone. And I also don't like it when other media do so. As far as I know, I've never bumped into a photographer who does that, but I've worked on stories. For instance, when Mandela was in hospital,
yeah,
a lot of journalists from around the world were in Soweto in South Africa in the township doing similar stories in the street where he grew up. I mean, everyone was in the same spot. And I would arrive to a family's home, or I would work with a fixer who would take me to someone's family's home, and it would be the family that was already visited before, and they would ask for a payment, and I would say I'm not paying, I'm a photojournalist. And then they said, oh, but CNN paid, or BBC. Right. Usually the big media, the big television media houses, apparently it's a bit more normal or normalized, or in television world, it's really seen as more okay, I would say.
Right.
And that really got in the way of my storytelling, of course, because people were like, oh, you're not paying, I'm not gonna do anything, which okay, if that, you know, that's okay, but it was very difficult. But on that spot I was really decisive, thinking, okay, I'm never going to pay because it's difficult. What I do sometimes do, if I follow a family for a long time, or that's usually the case. A family for a long time is quite a good example. I would on the last day maybe take them on a dinner, and pay for the dinner. But I would do that anyways. As a person, I would feel really bad if I wouldn't. So if it's the end of whatever I'm photographing, I feel that's justified. I've also come across a few occasions where, as a photojournalist, I felt I should put my camera down, not to rescue people, but where I should just leave the story and help out. Not by carrying, but by helping someone financially. I've had that once, and it was interesting because after I did that, I felt good as a person. But I felt horrible as a photojournalist, and it's so weird because you're first a human being, but it's so intertwined. I really saved someone by helping financially with something, and dropped the story. I didn't photograph at all. And I still felt like I was not being a good photojournalist, which I wasn't also. Anyways,
but in the end, maybe it's better to be a good person than a good photojournalist.
But
of course. But what you're getting at there is there's a very big difference between some sort of benefit in advance versus some sort of reward afterwards. I think that it would be very hard to be doing a proper journalistic story and pay someone up front, because the payment would shape what they're going to say in your interaction after that. But as you say, if you've been with a family for a day, a week, a month, or whatever, why wouldn't you take them to dinner? You know, at the end, it's not going to change the story at that point. And that's just, as you say, being a human being there. And I think that's, again, as I said before, the most important ethical thing, right? You wouldn't just walk away. Otherwise, you're feeling like you're exploiting them at that time.
100%. Very true.
So again, that's the situational thing, right? It depends on before versus after, and so on. It also depends on, like, what's the purpose of the work that you're doing. If it's a proper journalistic investigative piece, then
skip the dinner, I would say.
The requirement's going to be much, much stricter, and you have to be much, much more careful. If you've been, I imagine, say, commissioned for a much lighter, lifestyle piece in a magazine,
then fine.
Different issue.
Yeah, very true. So that's why I also think a code of ethics is important, but you can't have a one general. It's so situational. There's no way. Yeah.
So that is hard in that MPPA code because it says no payment, but then is a meal payment? Is a meal afterwards what they mean by payment? So that's where writing it down in one form versus the situation as another becomes complex. So again, to Elizabeth's opening question, should there be an ethics policy? I don't think you can have a single policy that covers all circumstances reasonably. You can definitely have a set of principles, but then you have to negotiate them in the situations and so on.
Yeah, or within, let's say, one specific newspaper having a code of ethics for their photojournalist. It might help to also have conversations about the topic if something's written down on paper. A conversation like this would be very interesting to have with some editors. Yeah, so I think in that sense, it's also good to have it as a basis. Yeah.
Let's go to Arturo's question that he posed. So I hope people are reading Arturo's excellent blog articles on the VII Insider Blog, because he's doing this great series calling attention to some fantastic Latin American photographers and the work they do. And the images are excellent that he brings us, and the writing is really good. So I recommend that to everyone in the audience. Get to the blog and have a look at those. But he's asking here, as a photography lecturer, I've noticed that students are very cynical towards the efficacy and relevance of documentary photography. What's your opinion on this? What would you tell people studying photography? Do you have the same, when you're teaching, do you get the same thing?
Yes, I do. I think I'm 38 and so there's a whole younger, I feel a bit old saying that, but there's a still younger, very much younger generation under. Yeah, and what I've noticed with the really young students, let's say the early 20, 22, 23, to them, the biggest way of making a change is a phone and posting online. And there's a less of the relevance to put in time and to really work on a documentary for years on end or months or weeks. That's the one thing I always hear back when I'm teaching that age group. And I don't want to generalize too much, but I do teach a lot. A lot of them are like, what? Why do you spend so much time?
Right.
They think more in short clips, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, reels. And to be very honest, there are reels, 30-second clips on Instagram that make a bigger impact than any journalistic story might ever had. They are viewed millions of times. It doesn't maybe change the world, but
what does?
People watch it, or it does, So I think that really short kind of snippets is more what we're going towards. I mean, you see it on the news, the items are getting shorter and shorter because people have less attention span. So I think documentary photography, which is built on spending time, on investigating, on being the fly on the wall, on taking months or years, that's kind of what they feel like. It's like the very slow way of storytelling for them. It feels like, why would you do it so slowly? You can just film it and do it and make a short story, put it on Instagram. That's kind of, but maybe Arturo is maybe maybe for him it's different in a way, like maybe he's bumping into a different specific of this, but this is what made me think of that. The relevance to them is, why would you put so much time into something that hardly anyone watches? Newspapers, what is that kind of
what's a
why would you read that? Like,
what's a CD?
What exactly? So that's what I have bumped into. So that makes me a bit fearful for long-term stories. Actually, who's going to put the effort in if and I teach a lot, so I'm like
One thing I found recently teaching was that actually a large number of the participants in the class didn't know much about some of the what we who are older think of as the documentary tradition.
So true.
That history, ironically, has not been part of their education to some point. And when they get to observe it, then they find some of it pretty amazing, but then also kind of overwhelming that it takes. It's so in depth, so long, so large, and so on.
And you have to be so concentrated for an hour or whatever. Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that what we take to be, at a certain age, the canon of photography, the established tradition, which is very problematic because it's by and large a Western and certainly European, North American tradition. It's not global at all. But that's not as widely known, perhaps, as we think on a generational basis. So I think that's also interesting. And I'm not making that point because I think that tradition had enormous efficacy and changed the world. It didn't. It contributed to conversations. That's the whole thing. I don't think images change the world anyway.
Yeah.
They play a role in collaboration with other things if you're lucky. And I hope we're lucky that they do, but it takes a coalition of things to make change happen over time. So I don't think this black and white tradition of picture magazines and photojournalism is like the gold standard of change and efficacy. But it is interesting that it's probably not as widely known as we thought about, in that sense.
I wonder if that's bad. To me, it feels like education is always good, knowledge is good. On the other hand, I don't know. It might be interesting if they go in without knowing that and then
exactly.
New things, new voices.
I mean, in this example, when we were showing them some of this more traditional work, we were keen to stress that this was not to suggest this was the gold standard or anything that they had to copy from, but it was another source of inspiration along with novels and documentary films and other things that they were consuming.
Nice.
Because you have to be very careful about put to the past and saying, well, the present and the future should replicate that completely.
Yeah. No, that would be bad. Yeah.
Definitely don't want to be doing that.
No.
Let's.
You're really good with the question. Do you want, I think you have it under control, right?
Yes, it's fine. Let me.
Okay, good. I think you have a plan more than I do. There's a lot coming in. Oh wow.
I mean, Artur's got a follow-up point, which I think is interesting to this question of change. He says, so why, if images don't change anything, why take photographs if nothing will ever change? Some of them then think it's just because of the ego of the photographer. Yeah, I wouldn't swing the other way and say that nothing ever changes and images don't have an impact. I just don't think that the social change is a product of the image alone. I think it's a product of the image disclosing something and working with other forms of information and social groups and struggle to bring something about. At the bottom line, if something is not visible visually, it becomes more difficult to talk about. So making it visible is kind of a precondition for a conversation or a set of actions that might lead to change, but it's not sufficient for that sort of thing. So I just wouldn't want an absolute opinion one way or the other that, oh yeah, they changed the world, or no, they don't do anything, so don't bother taking them.
Because sometimes it's also about knowing about a story, right?
Yeah.
Or not at all knowing about it. Today, a student showed me a story I had never heard about. And I hardly ever cry, first of all, and hardly ever cry about pictures or because I see. And this, I just cried because it was, the thing I saw on these pictures was so harsh. Yep. And I had never heard about the story. And when you Google it, you also don't read much about it. There's nothing. Right. And then you think, wow, this story really showed me something I didn't know. So that's also the role of photography, really, just to inform without
exactly
anything else.
To provoke, absolutely. We've been talking a while. We have more questions to go through, and we will certainly go through them, but let's see some pictures. And so I asked Ilvy to show a story that actually together we have a little bit of a history on, because it was part of the Solutions Visual Journalism Initiative that ran at World Press Photo when I was working there. And we commissioned 6 people to do stories. And also just want to call attention to to the idea of solutions journalism through this. And there's a presentation on the website from January last year, January 22, about solutions journalism, talking about a couple of the other stories. But Ilvy's was one of the 6 stories on co-housing. So Ilvy, take us through this story. Tell us a little bit about how you came, because we also have a couple of questions directed at you about your work. So this is a good opportunity to bring in Helene's question, because she says, I'm always amazed by your long-term projects. Since you began your career, you've covered a variety of topics, from youth in South Africa to your more recent work on co-housing. How do you come up with ideas or stories to pursue? So there's the starting point for
good one. Well, usually the stories I work on come from, and thanks for the question, from I always tell students the same, actually. If you start working on a long-term story, you better be very much interested into this story, because otherwise you can't work on it for 1 year or 5 years, or in my case with my South Africa project, 12 years. And the project on co-housing, sometimes I find stories by reading a book or reading a newspaper or listening to the radio. And sometimes it really comes from within. So in this case, the story on co-housing, which basically is about either intergenerational co-housing, where I would, for instance, live together with my dad and maybe sisters, or the co-housing where different families live together, like the picture you see now. So that is something that has always interested me. I grew up on a houseboat in the Netherlands, and there were 6 boats in total on a small part of the river. So we were a close-knit community. So I've always been interested in that communal living. From the houseboat, I moved out of my home when I was 17, and I moved to a student housing. And there again, I was living together with 5 other people, and I loved it. I know a lot of people hate sharing kitchens and gardens, and I loved it. And then after that student housing, I moved into my own house and with my partner. And I realized, after a few years, that co-housing, that it interests me to live with others. So that's when I realized a couple of years ago I should do a project about it, because I realized it's not just myself, it's just me that had an interest for it. It was slowly becoming a trend. I was seeing a TEDx talk about it. I was reading it in magazines, and then I thought, I've never seen a photo story about it. So I started reaching out to different co-housing houses around, first in the Netherlands and then Belgium, and now I'm also going to Germany. And so it came from a personal interest. And for me, when I work on a story like this, it's really important to not, I know there's a lot of photographers who just work on personal projects, which is a beautiful thing, personal as in about themselves or their own family. But I really like, even though this came from a personal experience, I really wanted to be journalistic. So I started doing research, and I found out that co-housing was actually researched to be a great solution against loneliness, people feeling lonely, a great solution to childcare, especially when you're living together with several families, but also elderly care when you're living together with your parents. The grandparents can take care of the children, for instance, in this family you see here, and the other way around, the children take care of the grandparents. So it's a solution to, it's sharing cost, it's more sustainable. You can share cars, you can share bikes, you can share, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean you are sharing your living room or your toilet. That's not the kind I would like to, I love camping, but not in my daily life. If I would be co-housing, I would really like all the spaces to be for myself, but at the same time have a shared space, a communal house where you can share a kitchen, you can share a living room, and where during the day or at night you can meet others and be with others. Yeah, so I I figured I would finish it in a couple of weeks, like I usually think I will. And then I lasted 3 years and ongoing, of course.
And it's still going, yes.
Still going, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you also realize when you start researching, you realize there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
For instance, this specific picture was taken in a co-housing here in Utrecht, where I live in the Netherlands. And it was undocumented immigrants living with Dutch people. And then, yeah, so it's more of a taking care of each other in different ways, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason why I think this counts as a really good solutions journalism story is the point of solutions journalism is not that the photographer comes up with a solution. It's not that there's a single solution to a problem. It just changes the starting point of the narrative and the visual narrative. So here the images are not about the problem of loneliness or the problem of integrating refugees. It's moved on to let's document communities who are already responding to those issues and are living in a different way and have a different response to it. So it's still journalistic, but its starting point is completely different. And I think that is a profoundly significant thing to think about in putting stories together. I put in the chat for everyone in the audience a link to the previous presentation on solutions journalism where we talk about that and show some other things, because I think this is an underdeveloped approach in photography and visual journalism. And it's also not about setting out to make a positive story.
Exactly. I was about to say that. That's why it's so like photographers and journalists are like, oh no, solution stories, they have to be happy. No, they don't have to be happy. They have to be about a solution. It doesn't, I mean, I photographed someone passing away in this specific story. It wasn't necessarily a happy moment, but it's part of life. So
and you might have found that the co-housing things failed and everyone started being antagonistic towards one another and they broke up, and you would have been documenting that.
Yeah, absolutely. Has happened.
So it's the same documentary protocols, but with a different narrative starting point. And I think that changes the shape of the story in itself.
Very true.
We've got a comment from Ariel Chan to you, Ilvy. So she says, thank you for being here today. Through your work, you document many different cultures, lifestyles, and communities, yet they all feel so intimate. Whether it's photographing birthday parties or documenting the youth in Africa, how do you keep it raw and intimate?
Raw and intimate. How do I keep it raw and intimate? What a good question. What a difficult question.
Yeah.
Good as well. I think the raw part comes, in my case, from staying for a long time. Staying with one family, not for one day, but for 2 weeks, or in this case, with this family, way more than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I would sleep there, I would stay there I think that's how the raw kind of part comes in. I mean, this is, of course, a very specific raw image we're looking at now, but in general, I think my images kind of show daily life, and it's not always, it's usually showing the daily life, which can be very boring. If you look at this image, there's not a whole lot happening. It's just, we all know this scene and it looks boring, but that's also what makes it raw, in a sense where you realize, okay, this is just normal life. That's what it is. And these kind of images, I think you can make when you linger around for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say about the raw part. What was the other one again? Sorry, raw and?
Raw and intimate. I mean, how do you?
Yeah. Oh, I think they go hand in hand then. And the intimate part sometimes is more difficult because it takes a while for people to get used to you or me or whoever has the camera in their hand. It just takes a while for families to trust you, and that can be more difficult because intimate is this, to me, is intimate. Wait. This is intimate.
Yeah.
This one is too.
Yeah.
And that's all about trust. And to be honest, trust also grows when you stay longer.
Yeah.
So it does go hand in hand. You stay longer. So at one stage, John, the man you see here, which is the same man that passed away in the last image, he trusted me because I was there all day
Right.
long, weeks on end. And then he said, then when I asked, would you mind if I take pictures of you taking a shower?
Yeah.
Because his wife told me I helped John in the shower because he can't like stand on his own.
Yeah.
And then I figured I can just ask.
Yeah.
And I always feel bad for asking these kind of things, but I asked and they were fine. They really didn't mind at all. They were like, oh, of course, not a problem. So I went with them 2 times while he was like dressing. And that's when I took this picture.
Yeah.
And that's intimate, I would say, because I was there for such a long time.
Yeah. So it's about actually being embedded. This is a different notion of being embedded.
Yeah.
Not with the military, but with the co-housing cooperative in this case. So you're embedded. It's the time that gives you the depth. It's the trust that comes from that. It's that relationship that gives you the access that ends up producing the intimacy.
Yeah. And to be honest, I think the word bed in embedded also has a very important role here, because I really try to stay over at people's house. Even if there's a hotel next door, I will ask people, can I please stay in your house? Even though I really don't like it usually.
Right.
I like my own space. I mean, it's the co-housing has to be, I have to have my own space. So staying at a family's house on the couch, but on the couch, that's also where they are reading their book at night and sleeping and with the little night lamp. And it's the moments you catch in those after hours and early morning is these kind of images. So
and then they see you in a more vulnerable situation, waking up in the morning, part of the community and so on.
100%.
Not just breezing in from outside. It's a little bit indirectly related to this, but Nicole's got an interesting question. Won't apply to the co-housing project, but sort of general projects. Has anyone ever been in a situation, have you been in this situation or aware of anyone, where there's been comeback after a photographer has photographed, for example, refugees, the underprivileged, individuals in the street, and they've been unpaid, and then the photographer's gone on to win a monetary award after entering into a competition, and the participants in that story come back and say, I'd like a cut of the award or some benefit. Now, it's probably not happened in this case, but you won a major award with this story at POYI, right?
Yeah, I did.
Which is excellent. Have you ever experienced that sort of comeback, or have you ever heard anyone going through that?
Yeah, I've never experienced it myself, but to be honest, I've never really won any big prize money as far as I know. Well, maybe once. Yeah, with the camp. Yeah. But I have heard it the other way around, where a guy, I think in South Africa, was photographed just by a photographer on the street, and that picture ended up on a billboard, and he found out. He found out through the internet. I think it's about 10 years ago, and filed he made it a case, and in the end the photographer had to pay him, which I think is quite fair, very fair, because it was a commercial thing. I mean, but besides that, I have never heard of any case like this.
So again, that may vary depending on whether it's a commercial situation versus a journalistic situation and so on. The one that springs to mind is the guy who's now an adult but was photographed as the baby that appears on the Nirvana album cover, swimming. Whose parents obviously provided that photograph to the record company to be on the album cover, but he decided 4 decades later that he didn't like it and he wanted compensation. I'm not sure how that resolved. But
I wonder if he got it, because I think I vaguely remember. I'm not sure. I vaguely remember he didn't, because he doesn't look like his own, like the baby image anymore. But I'm not sure. But I heard that case.
Jay has a question which he asked in advance and is also posting here about the question of processing images, toning, color changes, and so on. How much? Well, first of all, as a prelude to that, I think this is an interesting debate, because of course, when we're talking about digital images, absolutely everything is processed, much more so than in terms of film negative and so on, because of course the sensor on your camera collects data, it doesn't produce an image. And that data has to be processed, even to be on the LCD window on the back of a camera. It's going through an algorithm, and the algorithms actually, for those on the back of cameras, make them brighter and sharper so you can see them on smaller screens, even if you're shooting raw. But obviously then to actually make the image and get it ready for this and make it part of a story, there is processing involved. How much do you do? How do you think about what's acceptable? What sort of standards do you feel that you abide by in that?
Yeah, there is not a lot allowed
Right.
at all. I stick to the standards and of World Press Photo.
Right.
They are very strict. For instance, you can crop, but you cannot move any pixels, which also means, let's say I don't like the freckle here on her chest here. I can't take that off, of course, because it changes the image. So basically the things I do, I put contrast, I make it a lighter, darker. In this case, I used, it's not really a filter, but it's like a preset, which makes the darks lighter and the lighters dark. So it's like less contrast, basically. So that's what I do. And the color up a little bit. I like putting yellow into my images a bit, but you can never put more yellow than it actually, I mean, it has to look real. So I can't make the sky yellow and pretend it was a sunny day. That doesn't work. So yeah, it's very limited what you're allowed in photojournalism, which I think is great. And I really like it, that it's so strict. I think it's very important that it is. And every year when the World Press Photo is, people are complaining about the strict rules.
Oh yeah.
I'm not one of those. I really believe that if as a person, I think if I would get more room, change things, I think the border, the line we have drawn in the sand is gonna slowly move somewhere, and you don't know where. Maybe I sound like a granny now, but I like the fact that when you see a picture, you know when it's, for instance, when it's in World Press or in the New York Times, you know nothing has been altered. And I like to know that. I think AI is going to change a whole. I think within 10 years, this conversation we're having now about this part of the conversation, it's going to be outdated, I'm sure. But
maybe
for now, I really like it.
Yeah. Well, with the speed that AI is going, that could be within 10 months. We don't know.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Like with AI?
Well, I'll come to AI in a second, but just on this question of processing, this also goes into my past life, of course. I'm going to, in the chat, I've put a link to a report I did for World Press Photo before I worked there as a staff member, which is on exactly this question of what are the international standards. Now, it's from 2014. I think it still actually holds up pretty well. I would have to go back. I interviewed, I know, 24 editors around the world to ask what their standards were. And so it was very interesting because the conclusion was there absolutely no alteration of pixels. Do not put things in, do not cut things out. That was what counted as manipulation. And I agree entirely with that. The processing part about the tone, the color, the filters, their response was, to put it very crudely, don't be excessive. And then you would say, well, what's excessive? Well, that depends. And that's a judgment call. And so in the end, the thing about the pixels is, of course, that's the one thing you can test for and check. You can detect whether a pixel has been altered deliberately or not deliberately. And you know, I remember way back in 2015, there was this huge public issue because World Press Photo announced that 20% of the people with the new rules had been excluded from the competition. And so it was like, oh, so many people are manipulating images and they've been disqualified. Well, that wasn't quite the case. What it was that, and, you know, a lot of this was confidential, so you can't talk so much about it, but there was no photoshopping in the sense of someone putting someone else's head on a body and trying to pass it off as another image. It was usually bad cleaning up of sensor dust or something that, that wiped out another part of the image, for example. And the rule was so strict that it wasn't a question of intention. It wasn't a question of effect. Did it change the meaning of the image? Because it probably didn't. It was just like, if a pixel has been altered, boom, sorry, you can't go to the last round. And like you, and I don't mind being the grandfather on this, it's like, I think that's a good thing, because we're talking about images that you want to have as trustworthy documents that could stand up as evidence.
Yeah.
And if you think of Ron Havi's pictures and other pictures from the Bosnian Wars, we've had presentations on those and discussions on those, they've ended up in the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, or the ICC.
Yeah.
And you don't want someone coming along and saying, well, he changed some pixels, that image is not true.
Yeah.
And so you want that assurance that that baseline thing, which is one thing you can test for and that everyone agrees on, is not being violated. And you know, more creative documentary projects, you can do different things if you're transparent about what you've done and you've told the audience. Art projects, knock yourself out. You can do it,
whatever.
you know,
totally agree.
and you can be as creative till the cows come home. But if you want to document, if you want evidence, you can't touch a pixel, and we should back up that standard. So
I agree.
You know, but yeah. Oh, Jaime's just saying, going back to the Billboard guy, that he lost the case. I think was it. I'm not sure whether it was the Billboard guy.
The Nirvana guy.
It might be the Nirvana guy who lost.
I think the Billboard guy won, right?
The Billboard guy won.
One of them won. The other one lost.
Nirvana guy lost.
Nirvana. Oh yeah, Nirvana.
Yeah. Thank you, Jaime.
Thank you.
Anyway, so I put the link into that report if you want to go into more detail on what people said about what was excessive, what was not excessive, and so on. But in the end, of course, it was one of the things that you pointed out, Ilvy. You know, excessive toning would change colors. So if you took a photo of me now, if you turn my shirt red, then obviously that's absolutely excessive toning. If you used that filter that made it slightly darker, slightly lighter, no problem. But there's no mathematical answer to saying, oh, you could change it by 10% or 20%. It's a judgment call on that, you know. Anyway, so I think there's a very big difference between processing and manipulation. Manipulation is the intent to deceive, involves adding things, removing things, or, you know, misleading caption or whatever. Processing is about turning that data into an image, but you have to have, for documentary work, you need to limit the amount of changes even there. Big question, but lots of reading that report if people want to follow up on that. So we've got a couple of questions about kind of career things. So we've got a few more minutes. We can take a couple more questions, but this is a good time to get to some of those career questions. So one from an anonymous person who's from India, and one from Dimitrios. So if this is for you, Ilvy, if you were advising someone and they wanted to start their career in photojournalism and documentary, how would you say they should begin? What should they look out for when they're starting? And for Dimitrios's question, how should they approach the question of the market and trying to get work and trying to do paid work and so on?
I think for both, I think the advice I could give, or the one advice that I'm giving students as well, if you start a story, I mean, you're already a photographer or starting photographer, I think the best way to get the attention of editors, and also the best way for you to start practicing or really start learning how to tell stories, if that's what you like doing, is to pick a subject that is of interest to you, but hopefully not to you only. Like, ask friends, ask family, like, is this interesting to you? Look online if this is a story that has been told before a lot of times or not. So if you find a story like that, and it's really not impossible, listen to the radio, read newspapers, watch television, get your hands on some National Geographic magazines from the 90s and look through them, look what was being told then, look on the website of World Press Photo, on Seven's website, and look for stories that have been told, and by doing that, you will find stories they will pop into your mind, probably things you could work on that are related to it, for instance. Then I would start shooting the story and start telling people you're working on it. And then my advice would be, if it's financially possible, to go to photo festivals where you can meet editors. There are photo festivals all around the world, from Bangladesh to France to America. And this is the place where you can meet editors. At the same time, I would advise you, if possible, to find mentors or to do a mentorship program, which you can do at 7, although the deadline closes in a few hours, I think another 5 hours or so, and then the deadline's over. But you can apply for the mentorship program. There are different organizations that offer different kinds of programs around the world, and I would really look for those too, because that's where you meet people, that's where you meet peers, that's where you learn more. That's what I would do, because when you then have that one story that might get published, hopefully gets published, from that it could have this kind of what's called vliegwiel, like it could have the effect of getting your first assignment, and then your first assignment might get your second assignment.
Snowball effect.
Snowball effect, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what my advice would be. And speak to editors, ask them what kind of stories they're looking for. Go to photo festivals would be my number one advice, if you can afford it. But usually they are also, hopefully, I guess, in your region, because they do happen on a larger or bigger or smaller scale all around the world.
Let's go back to one of Elizabeth's questions, which I think is one of the really difficult ones. I mean, she was giving various examples and asking, do we think a specific enforceable code of ethics is impossible? And my answer to that was yes, for the variety, because we don't have an industry. But that's not a license to say that ethics is not important. It's actually the reverse. It's actually everyone's responsibility. And there are very important, we've discussed that both in terms of the previous answers, the question of processing and so on. But she also asked whether the industry should have an ombudsman. And that's particularly relevant in terms of the difficult issues of the Me Too movement, sexual harassment, bullying, things like that. Columbia Journalism Review has reported on those instances in the profession. It seems too many. So Ilvy, first of all, have you ever experienced this? And then secondly, do you know people who have experienced this? And then thirdly, what do you think should be the way we approach this as an issue?
Yeah, no, I've definitely experienced things, sadly, in this photojournalism field where I felt either threatened in some way, or I felt I was not being treated fairly, or and sexual harassment. It actually all three has sadly happened. And when those things were happening, the most logical thing to me would be to report it locally, so to the newspaper I was at, or the festival I was at, so an ombudsman, is that how you say it in English? Ombudsman is I don't know if that would help, because legally I would rather go to the police. I didn't, but I feel the countries that these things happen in, and the situations that these things happen in, are everywhere around the world equally bad. But the way to treat them and local law, I just don't know if it would help to have one organization dealing with that globally. I don't think that would work. But so for me, I would say maybe.
Again, that's very difficult to think about a single center or person in the world who could deal with that, because what authority would they then have?
Exactly. Which law are they going to?
Legal jurisdictions and so on. And then what's worst about these situations, of course, is that a lot of police authorities, a lot of legal jurisdictions do not handle these situations appropriately or well.
True.
And I'm talking about, I mean, there's a very famous case in Australia that's been going on for a few years about someone who worked in politics and who was allegedly raped, and whose case had to be disbanded in the end because of all sorts of things that had gone wrong with the investigation and so on. And she had been put through an extraordinarily difficult public situation in the process, but she was the victim, you know. And that's the trouble is, you know, it's the re-victimization, re-traumatization of people who have been subject to these things. So it's hard to imagine a single person, committee, or authority that would be able to do that. The police and the law is not sufficient in places. So then it's up to festivals, media organizations, foundations, etc., to take responsibility for appropriate and inappropriate behavior in their areas.
I think that has been improving a lot in the last years. I think, I mean, isn't the ombudsman also someone who, what I would see that might be useful is some kind of advisory, I mean, not a board, but like an advisory committee that you wouldn't necessarily go to with your one specific case.
Right.
They might be able to advise in some way what to do. I think I would have really loved that I would have been able to go to a website or an organization to say, okay, this is happening to me. I don't know what to do. Should I go to HR or should I go to my photo editor or where do I go? And that's that there would be a group of international people from each region that could generally advise you what to do, what the best practice would be. Something like that would have helped, maybe.
I think that's an interesting point, that we're not looking for a legal authority, we're not looking for an investigative authority, but maybe some sort of source of advice.
Like even the advice to, for instance, make screenshots of all the emails or
WhatsApp messages
or things that would have been great looking back, and I never so that kind of advice would have
so that is still something that, again, there's not a single body, there's not a single committee or organization that could do that, but there are, you know, committees and organizations in photography, photojournalism, journalism generally, that could have that. So that would be something to maybe see a bit more develop. I think that brings us to the end of our time. We have a very nice comment from Jaime about the various presentations and what we might do in the future, including perhaps a series on photography co-ops and collectives. I think that's an interesting idea, looking at the experience of those and the benefit of photojournalists and photographers coming together to support one another. Very different from agencies, who, given that the VII Foundation has acquired the Seven Photo, that's taken on a different status because of the changing market and so on. We could probably talk about that actually in terms of co-ops, but I think that's an interesting idea. We'll look into that, definitely.
Nice.
If anyone has questions in the future, or if anyone has
someone just asked me this question on WhatsApp. Okay, Nicole, I don't know the official answer, but I would say, so Nicole's question is, as per selection criteria for the mentorship program, what is considered as proof of at least 6 published pieces of work? And I have been photographing for 3 years, but have not earned an income, and I'm therefore not considered a professional. I don't know the official answer, but I just got exactly this question. This person that reached out to me was afraid that 6 published pieces had to be from different publications. That's not what I'm reading. Just 6 publications. And I also have the feeling at this stage in your career, when you are maybe want to become a mentee, these publications don't have to be New York Times, Time Magazine, National Geographic. I think it can be a publication in a school or university magazine. Am I right?
That sounds right to me. What I would say to Nicole is double check email 7 Academy. There's definitely an information email on the mentorship page. They will respond and answer. They'll be checking all these things as the deadline approaches.
There's a few hours left.
Nicole, I would proceed on the basis of your best examples in the broadest range that you might consider publication. I'm sure that will work out, but email to be double sure.
I agree. There's 10 hours left on.
10 hours. Wow.
You'll be fine. You'll get an answer, I think, in time.
So we all operate very close to deadlines.
Exactly.
It's
no
all
deadline,
fine.
no glory.
Exactly.
Good luck also, Nicole.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then just a reminder to everyone else, email us anytime with questions, email us anytime with suggestions for topics that you want investigated.
I'll put it in the chat, Irina. Irina asked, where can I find the submission form?
Yeah. I'll give you that information.
Everyone. Okay, wait, I'll put it in now. Sorry, I know we're at the end. There, it's
That's
in.
okay. All good. Ilvy, thank you.
Thank you.
It's been fun being in the hot seat.
Yeah, this was
it was very warm on occasions, but all good.
Yeah, I like this.
We'll do it again sometime, but next week we'll get back to visualizing the climate crisis. So
I love that series, by the way.
Very interesting discussion about fashion.
Ooh.
So a topic I know very little about in all senses.
I'm gonna go watch it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you everyone for the questions, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.